Yeah, so this might be familiar for a lot of you, but probably not everyone. And I guess anyone could list this this history. At least this is one way to just view some of the highlights. So Lucene, the search library, was made by Doug Cutting way back in '99. He started his life somewhere else, and then it was part of Apache in 2001. And then Yannick Seely created Solr in 2004, which then became a sub-project of Lucene in 2007. So it was never a project by its own in Apache. It's always been a sub-project of Lucene.
I'm not sure that's true. Is that really true? I don't know, but we have two old timers here who really can tell us. I think if Uwe wants to unmute himself, he could probably correct us. But I looked at the Wikipedia page before coming here, which I saw you just recently edited to update the status of Solr as a TLP. But apparently Solr was a top-level project back in before this, in 2005. So I think this is its second time.
Yeah, I also was confused about that. I first thought the same as you, but then I also started researching. So if anyone can give the truth, that this was before I was around. So
I'm not 100% sure because you were asking me. It was also before my time, but I think it was originally maybe intended to have it as a top-level project when it was going through the incubator. I think that might be something, but Solr was from the very beginning. It was always a sub-project of Lucene. So at least since the time when the code was accepted in the subversion at that time.
Yeah, what I did find was some traces of incubator in 2006, and then a message that it would graduate from the incubator and become a Lucene sub-project. And so I think that's correct. Yeah. But I also see that, yeah, it's way back. So I think we have different perspectives.
But actually you can add here something. So actually you can add here something. So Lucene joins Apache as a Jakarta sub-project at the beginning. So Lucene was getting a top-level project after that, somewhere between 2001 and 2007.
Yeah, Jakarta was Apache's first kind of Java corner of Apache, and then I think Lucene graduated as a TLP in 2005, if I'm not wrong.
So maybe this is a little bit of inside stuff, like what is a TLP, what's not a TLP, and so on. But I want to share one little anecdote from those times, and maybe then we can come up a little more to the present day. In 2005, when I was working at this company, you know, using these, earlier we were using other search engine technologies, you know, that we tried. And then one of the smart young people who joined, he just came out of school. He's like, I heard about this new thing. We should try it. It's called Apache Lucene, and you know, it's like search. It's free. We can use it. You know, we were paying you know, money to companies like Jan's, you know, to buy their search technology and use them on these websites, and they were quite expensive. So, and we were, you know, scrappy little company. So we heard about this thing. We thought this is great. So this guy Dan, he started working with Lucene. He built like a whole search capability in our application using Lucene. And then he's like, you know, I found out there's this other thing called Solr, and it does all this stuff for you. Like, I don't have to build, you know, my own cache, my own, you know, query parsers, all these things, which, you know, kind of were made much easier by using Solr. And so then he's like, yeah, this is really the only way to go. So I think that's how a lot of users perceived it at that time. Very few people, there were fewer people interested in using Lucene directly as a library, I think, because most people building applications would want a whole server packaged up. Anyway, so that was kind of the early days. I'll stop talking now. Sorry, Jan, for stopping on you.
No, I think it's nice to have a conversation style on this. Actually, that was my first experience with Lucene as well. While I was working for Fast, the commercial search engine company, they did a European research project, and I was put into that project to actually play with Lucene because they required an open source alternative to this expensive search engine. So that was my first touch point with Lucene as well, back in 2006. So, but anyway, 2010, I think is an important milestone here, because that's when we had the merge. You cannot have a split without a merge. So, so just to explain what that then means is that Solr was a sub-project, right, of the Lucene top-level project. It had its own subversion repository, own mailing lists, and back in that days, we also had separate committer lists. So different committers would only be allowed to commit to certain repositories, not all of them, right? And back in those days, we also had Hadoop as a sub-project of Lucene. They graduated in 2007. Nutch and Mahout and Tika were also sub-projects, right? And they all graduated in 2010 to top-level projects. So a lot of things happened around those times, but the reason why we merged the development and the committer lists of Lucene and Solr was because we saw a lot of parallel development and duplication of code, right? Stuff being put in the wrong place. And then that was the main reason for the merger, so that in one repository you could more easily move things around and push stuff from Solr down into the Lucene level where it belonged, and so on. So I think it was not an easy decision back then. I think it was a lot of debate and resistance as well. But anyway, from 2010 and the next few years, there was a lot of cleanup work done in the community. And then I'm not going to go into all the versions, but the history of the different major versions. And then we are here in 2021 with Solr now as a top-level project. Also, we have Solr gaining its own sub-projects, like the Solr operator for Kubernetes, and also the Solr Docker image. It's not a sub-project, but it's the ecosystem of Solr is also growing larger with also plugins coming in. And yeah, Lucene got its new logo as well this year. So I think that's what I plan to say on the history. I think you're muted.
Yes, I am. Sorry. So let's move to the hot topic then. Reasons behind the split. So what were like the different reasons that basically made the community think that a split in 2021, actually starting I think in 2020, it was a good idea?
It's hard to say. I think there are a confluence of a lot of little reasons. There's not like there was a big thing that was like, oh, we must split because of this one reason. But it was more, as I perceive it, and maybe others have a different view on it, but it was just a kind of a natural state of affairs that the projects were already operating kind of separately. So in other words, most of the developers worked primarily in one or the other. Most of the commits, to the code were only in one project or the other. The test failures, everything was kind of, you could look at almost any communication on the project, an email, an issue, a commit, all these things, and you could pretty much say which project it belonged to already. So it was like they already were two projects, but sharing a lot of resources. That's how I perceived it. And so it came to seem kind of natural to divide the resources just like you would refactor your code. If you have two separate packages that are mostly operating separately, then you want to be able to kind of address them independently, so that if you need to devote more resources in one dimension or other, you can do it to one and not the other. So in our case, that would be things like our mailing lists, or the tests. The test suite, I think, was a major area. if you were only mostly interested in Lucene work, there was a lot of Solr test work to be done in the Solr tests that, you know, was kind of to the side, but it consumed a lot of attention on the mailing lists. So that was one thing. I don't know, Jan, what would you say?
Well, the factual reason for the split starting was this email on this slide, right? That there was actually a proposal, and it's a democratic project, and so on. So, as far as I can recall, there were no similar, you know, real suggestions prior to that. Hey, let's split. I recall in one-to-one discussions with certain other committers, the topic has been up a few times, at least with some of my conversations. But I think it wasn't really a big pain point that everybody thought, oh, we have to split now, like you say. But then once this email from David Weiss came up, I think it resonated kind of with a lot of the committers, not everyone, but you see some of the quotes here. I feel Solr as its own Apache top-level project is actually long overdue. McCandless said that, and highlighting some of the maybe the issues that we've grown to hate over the years, that, oh, why do we have to release Solr now? There are no changes, or the opposite. Why do we need to release a bug fix for Lucene? There is not a single change, but Solr needed to release a bug fix. So there were some weird, you know, things of being married in that way that didn't really make sense for you know. We'll get back to some of those later. So there was this discuss thread, and then yeah, a lot of back and forth, but then it ended up with a vote thread, and some of I've highlighted the 5 concrete technical reasons that David had for his suggestion, and then there were some other reasons and some objections in the discussion that followed. But then there was a vote thread, and you see 33 in favor and 4 against it. So I would say it's a, you know, it's a community decision. It was not. I think it was more controversial to merge back in 2010 than it was now to split ways.
Brilliant.
I think it's important to emphasize the process, you know, behind the split, right? The votes, the discussion. This is the way everything is done, right? In an Apache community, all decisions are made on a mailing list. You know, so there might be discussions offline between, you know, groups of people, but if you ever want to make any decisions, you have to have the discussion on the mailing list, and then for something like this, there would have to be a vote. And so we eventually took a vote. We had discussions for, I don't know, a few weeks, and
yeah, and this is these kind of decisions is a majority vote, right? So even if there were 4 -1s, it doesn't mean it's a veto. It's you need more in favor than against, and then you can technically say it's a passed vote. But of course, subjects like this should really be a clear vote result. And I think this 33-4 is a very clear vote result. So it's not really controversial.
Absolutely. I think from like what we saw, committers were quite in agreement on this. Now, I think it's a good time to explore the pros and cons of the split, because of course there are like positive effects and potentially negative effects on both projects. So I would start from Lucene. So Mike, can you go through like what you think has been like a positive effect on the project, and something that potentially has been not that positive?
Sure. Yeah, so I think I alluded to some of the concerns before when we talked about the sort of reasons, but I think that from a developer standpoint, it's just easier to work only on Lucene. For example, if I make a change, you know, I can run a much smaller set of tests that run faster. You know, building a distributed search engine like Solr is a much more complex task than building a library that is, you know, a single process, doesn't have any inter-process communication. You don't have a lot of issues like eventual consistency that arises when you build clusters of interoperating servers and so on. So the testing process is much more focused and I would say easier. I mean, the tests are not easy to write, but it's much easier to write reliable tests. So as a developer, you can kind of iterate more quickly if you don't have to be concerned about the Solr part of the equation. So that's one thing. I would say this is not necessarily a pro, but it's a consideration, which is that Lucene is not only used in Solr, but is also used in other servers, Elasticsearch. Many companies use it embedded. It's in, I believe it used to be at least, I don't know if it still is, in Eclipse. So if you search your code, you know, it's indexed in Eclipse with Lucene, maybe in IntelliJ too, I'm not sure. You know, so it's all over the place in many different ecosystems. And so I think that it kind of makes sense to ensure that it has an API that is not entirely geared for a single use case. So that's kind of a pro. It's not, yeah. Some cons, I don't know, maybe I'm jumping ahead, Alessandro. Did you want to ask anything else, or?
Oh, no, that's absolutely fine. Yeah,
Okay,
maybe the committers are mostly in one project or the other.
Right. So I actually did a little Git history or analysis at this point. I was curious to see, like, if we looked at the history of commits on the projects or the people, you know, were people working in both projects or primarily in one or the other. And there's a fun tool that you can get. It's called the Git of Theseus, I think. You can run it on any Git repository. It shows you like the whole history in this beautiful graphical format. I encourage you to go play with it. In this case, I mostly was interested in just doing a little analysis of committers, and I found that most people committed most of their commits to either one project or the other. So they were polarized in that sense. You know, that was not universal. I mean, we know that, for example, sometimes we would make changes in the Lucene API, and then they would also cause changes in Solr. And so even I think people reflected on the mailing list at the time that even though some committers were operating across both places, often it was because they had originated a change in one or the other, and then just by needing to, you know, had to make some corresponding change in the other project. I think that actually kind of alludes to a bit of a concern going forward as we have a split project, which is there are dependencies. And, you know, as we make changes today in Lucene, we're very tightly bound to ensure that we don't break anything in Solr. Well, sometimes it happens anyway, but at least we get an early warning by running tests and you know, Solr, people who are actively developing in Solr will immediately see the effects of those changes. I think going forward, Solr will be consuming Lucene as a build time dependency. And so it'll be a little more work to ensure that degree of tight integration. We'll see how it goes, but I think there's a potential for, you know, a looser integration leading to maybe the bugs taking a little longer to surface. Another concern I have is, I think this is one of the reasons why the merge originally happened, was that there were duplicated implementations of some things in both code bases. So, you know, they had grown up independently just by virtue of there being different communities of developers, or someone developed something in Solr and then someone said, oh, we really need this in Lucene too. And so they sort of copied it or made another version of it that they thought was better. And then they're both continue to exist. This still happens today, though. I think inevitable when you have this larger code base. Like we have multiple already implementations of faceting or aggregations. Like if you want to count the number of times some field occurs in a set of search results, Solr has a way of doing it. Lucene has its own internal one, not as widely used, but it's there. And then the Elastic has yet another one built on top of the Lucene primitive. So there are all these things that are duplicated already. So I don't think this will get worse. There was a lot of refactoring that happened in around 2010 with the analysis classes. So the text processing was heavily duplicated, and I think that has now been much more rationalized over the years, and I hope it'll remain that way. We still have committers in both projects, so it's not like people can't keep things well coordinated. And then this last direct feedback from users, I don't know, we'll see. Whether Solr, people who are primarily Solr users, will they engage also with the Lucene mailing lists and community? I hope so, but it's potentially less the case if we split.
Perfect. Thanks, Mike. I think your point about committers that are mostly involved in one project or the other is actually a fair point, because if you are focused just on one of the two projects, of course, having like a smaller code base and a focus on a single project, of course, it's definitely going to be easier and much better, especially because in open source, not all people actually are able to do that every day. And because most of people are actually in another job, or anyway, even if it's related, you have different clients, different projects. So having the ability of simplifying stuff and the focus, I think, yeah, it's actually a good idea. And for the rest, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the possible negative points, yeah, that makes sense. So let's go to Solr now then. So Ian, what about like pros and cons in Solr then?
Yeah, we have some points here, and there are probably a lot of thoughts and opinions as well in the whole community. But some of those major pros is probably the people say, oh, it's about time. Why didn't this happen years ago? So this identity, visibility, it's hard when you've been part of the project for so many years. You kind of grow used to how things are. But I've also heard that some first-time users, they are kind of surprised to find Solr as part underneath Lucene. So maybe it makes more sense to find Solr in the new location, Solr Apache org. So a bit more visibility and identity, I guess, of its own. And independent releases could be, I mean, right now we have been forced to release the two together, which has been sometimes quite awkward for both projects, right? So being independent means that you can release a new major version of Solr when there are actually major features to release, which I think it makes more sense for the users as well, to actually see that there is a reason for a major release. So it depends, it remains to see whether Solr will follow the versioning of Lucene and release version 10 right after Lucene 10 and so on. Now at least it's free to go its own way, also with the version numbers. The insulation from Lucene changes is something we've seen bite us a few times. When Lucene does a change, normally you would get a test failing in Solr, but other times it's actually become a problem after the release. We see that, oh, this change in Lucene, it actually didn't show up on the radar of Solr developers. Whoever did the change in Lucene just made the test run on the Solr side, and it was not an optimal solution for how to implement this breaking change on the Solr side. So insulating these changes will also let the Solr team put some more thought into how to best use these new APIs or whatever. And I already mentioned the growing ecosystem. when Solr gets sub projects of its own, it's probably also about time to be a separate entity. On the negative side, who knows? There has been a lot of in the discussed thread, there were mentions of will we again fall behind Lucene? Where before the merge, I'm not sure, but Solr was kind of slow to pick up new versions of Lucene and kind of was falling behind. I'm not sure that will be a problem now. We have actually a shared pool of committers and PMC members. It's the same set of people on both projects, and some are actually using both of them. So I think today it's much more awareness and familiarity with both code bases. So I don't think we will fall behind, but that's one worry. And the same, the loss of momentum. It's more or less the same as was a negative side, the installation. If a primary Lucene committer would update Solr, you can say, okay, we get it for free because you're in lockstep. But it also can have a negative side. So now it can take some more time before those features are integrated in Solr, but maybe that's a positive thing as well. The blue one, slower time to market. I think it's not very often that you do one single commit that actually touches both Lucene and Solr in the same commit. But when it happens, of course, now after the split, you have to first commit it to Lucene, wait for a release, and then start using it in Solr. So it's just a new way of working in these cases. And the other one is more or less the same as do the Solr side have enough skilled Lucene developers to actually integrate the more hardcore stuff. But again, it's actually the same pool of people. So it remains to see how it goes.
Great, thanks, Jan. I think there's a lot of intersection between the groups of committers of the two separate projects anyway, I suspect. So that's actually a good thing, right? Because in this way, we won't get like too much separate communities anyway, right? I mean, most of the people will be still involved in one project or the other and the other. Great. Yeah, I agree on the features that affect actually like both the projects. And I remember at the time, for example, I contributed the Lucene document classification. So there was like a bit of work that happened in Lucene code, building on top of the initial classification that was introduced by Tommaso Teofili at the time, and introducing the support for document classification. So instead of just classification of text, had to basically bring changes Lucene sides and then of course Solr side to enable that. And yeah, at the time, of course, it was easier because you could just do that as you said in one commit, basically almost. I mean, doing one place and the other will just be a different way. And maybe we are going to do anyway more solid changes to Lucene potentially instead of rushing maybe for a quick integration to Solr. So let's see. Okay, so let's move to the next question, and it's what basically practically happened. So from the activities and tasks that have been carried on.
Yeah, so I guess this one is mostly on the Solr side because it's Solr that is actually finding a new home, right? It's all the things that you see here. We had like an umbrella Jira issue to try to track everything, and a lot of people helping out with creating new mailing lists, and we have a new user list, but it's migrated. So all the subscribers to the old Solr user lists were automatically migrated over to the new users at Solr Apache org. And there are a bunch of new mailing lists for developers that people have to subscribe to. The Git repos, both Solr and Lucene have a new Git repo. I guess partly because of the name of the old repo, which was Solr-Lucene. It doesn't, well, in 3 years, people would ask, hey, why is it called this? So both of them have a new repo, and the old Git repo is actually used for maintaining the old 8.x versions. So there will be some few more releases on the 8.x, which is a joint release. Also, Solr has a new website and a new Git repo for that website. So solrapache.org. I did a lot of the work of putting up the new site and fixing the redirect links from the old URLs in Lucene, so that everyone would, you know, you will not get a 404 error. You will just be redirected to whatever new location. So that was part of it. And then, of course, you have the perhaps the hardest part, because splitting the Git repos is not really that hard. It's the same history of both the new repos. You have all the history and all the code in there. And then on the Solr side, you just remove the Lucene folder. And on the Lucene side, you just remove the Solr folder. But of course, then the build will not run. So the major part was actually to fix the Gradle build on each side to do what it's supposed to do. Especially on the Solr side, you have to then depend on the Lucene jar files and so on, because you don't have the source there anymore. So that was a big work done a lot by David Wise. Thank you very much, and others. So I'm not sure if that is 100% done yet, the Gradle part, but we're getting there. And Jenkins and continuous integration, of course, Uwe has been doing a lot of work there to have, you know, the changing locations and the new repos and all the tests running automatically. I don't know if you want to comment anymore, Uwe, on some of these tasks.
Yeah, I can only comment actually what we have seen with Jenkins is because we are currently in the main repository. So for coming Solr 9.0, we are not yet relating or have a dependency to a specific version of Lucene. So we are going to the snapshot version. So, and because Jenkins builds a new snapshot release every night of Lucene, which is pushed to the Apache snapshot repository. So when you break something in Lucene, or when you change something in Lucene which breaks Solr, you would see it on the next day. So actually, this is already working. But as said before, if we no longer depend on snapshots of Lucene, this will stop working.
Yeah, so we'll find out if we maybe need a new Jenkins job to continue to build snapshots to discover, you know, issues or whatever. Probably some more work to be done there. Yeah, and I guess since we have not yet done a release after the split, so there is still a lot of work to be done. Excuse me?
I just want to thank you, Jan, and David and Uwe. They really did most of the lion's share, I think, of the work that had to be done to make this happen. A lot of people cheered them on, you know, made suggestions from the sidelines, but yeah, that went very smoothly, you know, I think so far. So congratulations on that. And I think our next release is going to go smoothly. We'll see.
Yeah, why not? Let's hope for the best.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So just to finalize, I think what is currently remaining is the release related scripts and the release process, the release wizard. If that is going to be done now or just as part of the actual release, I don't know, but it's probably a lot of headaches there as well to have the release artifacts built, you know, and shipped to the right location and so on. So these scripts, of course, they now rely on both Solr and Lucene and do a lot of testing on both as well. So we need to split those as well.
Makes sense. Okay, so now let's talk about users and contributors. So what is going to change for both of these categories in Solr and in Lucene potentially?
You want to start out, Mike? Will there be changes for Lucene users or developers?
I really don't expect there to be, for users. I think there will be very little change. The artifacts will still be shipped in the same place they were. I mean, one change that I've noticed is that just simply referring to the latest code, well, there's this new Git location, but I think you won't notice anything unless you're developing. If you want to look at the source code, then you start to see some changes. You know, certainly it was a little surprising to me when I went and looked at the repo one day and noticed there's no code here at all. I forget what there was. The master branch, as we called it at the time, has since been renamed to the main branch, but was emptied out in the old repository. You know, and so I had been used to getting my updates from there, right? And then it was suddenly gone. So you would notice that. You know, but it's really just a question of adapting, changing a pointer to go to the new repository. Yeah, and again, I think I'll say the mailing list has less traffic on it now from Solr tests, but otherwise really hasn't changed very much from the perspective of a Lucene developer or user. I guess there'll be a little more change for Solr users.
Yeah, on the Solr side, I guess users will not see a lot either, because they will be redirected from whatever bookmarks they used to have. They will just be redirected to the new site, and you push the download button and you will end up on the right download location. Of course, that location will change after the 9.0 release. Then it will be actually under the Solr subpath of the mirrors. But again, I think most people will go through the web page and click the download button. So it will be, you will just get there, right? So that's one thing, the web page and the mirrors. The mailing list changes for users. It's one list, and they are auto-subscribed to the new list. Of course, if they have some automatic filters in their mail client, they will need to update those so that the new Solr user mail will end up in whatever folder that they like. I think a lot of users already discovered that, because you saw a lot of unsubscribed messages coming in. Hey, why do I start getting all these emails in my inbox? Because they used to be stuffed down in some subfolder, right? But after the change, there is a new address, and people realized that they were subscribing to this list for years that they didn't read. So that's for users, and for the developers, it's more or less the same as for Lucene, because you have a new repo location, and of course, if you have some patches or pull requests up, you will need to do some steps in order to publish those pull requests on the new repo. It's not really hard, but there is a recipe up there on the old Solr Lucene site that you can follow, and then your pull request will be applicable to the new repo. And then, of course, backporting. If you have a change that you want to, for instance, a bug fix or security fix, you will want to backport that from 9x or main branch to 8.x. That will be a little bit more work, because you need to work with two different remotes, but it should be not really hard, because we have the same shared history in the Git. So the backport job is just to juggle those two upstream repositories. So yeah, that's basically, and this is a copy of the web page from 17th of February. That's when the new project started on the Solr side. And then this is actually what is out there for the users to see. And we have also been communicating on the lists about the new mailing lists and what people need to do. So hopefully people will not be too confused.
Brilliant. Yeah, I think at the beginning I was just surprised just because I think I checked the repos and I wanted to like check something in the code. I think just right after the 17th of February, I was in a short holiday. I came back and I was like, whoa, what happened? And then I remember, okay, I have like to look for all the separate repos, etc. But to be honest, I think it's quite well documented, and also from the mailing list side, yeah, you get initially like a lot of traffic because it's not filtered anymore by your original like skip inbox filter, but then it's something quite simple and quick to fix for, of course, someone that wants to still be a subscriber. And if you want to unsubscribe, of course, that's a different topic. Perfect. So I would like to go with the last question, which is with a blank response, actually, because probably there's no like very specific question, or anyway, not that we are aware at this point. Why did this not happen before? So Ian, Mike, do you have any idea, or anyone? Then, of course, we can expand this to the audience.
Well, I think there's two ways you could ask this question, two things you could mean by this question. One is, why did it take us so long to vote to split the two projects? The other one is, why, when we voted to do so last summer, did it take us until today to actually make it happen? And I think kind of the answer behind that, both of those is, it's a change that is, a lot of it is about internal stuff. Like, as we've seen, users are barely affected by this change. I mean, we think there may be some changes. So, I mean, I think people are highly motivated to do work when they see there's a benefit for customers, users. There's some reason that drives behind. This is more like an internal reorganization, a lot of it. And so I think that mustering the energy for that kind of work is hard to do, because the benefits are kind of abstract, and although I think there will be real benefits, the amount of work to achieve them was quite large. I mean, it took a lot of discussion to come to an agreement about it. There was some internal debate about the governance of the two projects that we had to resolve, and that took quite a while, I think. And then just the work that's been done over the last month or two was not insubstantial. I think it's quite a bit of work for a few people. In the end, I think it was pretty easy for everyone else. So we could have maybe done it sooner, but I don't know, I guess. That's the best I can offer.
Yeah, it's the same. I don't really have a good answer. I guess it's just, it happened to be a suggestion and a vote at this point in time. If that vote would have happened like 2 years ago, I think the result would be much the same. 5 years ago, I'm not sure, because it's too close to the merger maybe. So it's just hypothetical. So yeah, it's the best reason I can give.
Yeah, I think it's also possibly, as we have expressed in previous slides, an accumulation on divergence, right, and new stuff that justified this necessity. I think in the end, also to bring, like a little bit of fresh air to both the projects potentially. And after a certain amount of time, you may feel like you need something to, like involve new people potentially to change a little bit the cards, let's say. So it may be that it just took that amount of time. Effectively, maybe would have happened 1 year before, it wouldn't have changed that much. But from the point of view of once the poll has been like asked to the committers, the fact that it took like, I don't know, like 7-8 months, I think that's pretty much normal. There was a lot of stuff to do. And not all people are excited by this kind of infrastructural change, right? So, everyone says like, yeah, great, let's do that, in a sort of plurali is like in Latin, plural majestatis. So like that everyone will do that, but then who really implement that, of course, is not that easy to be found. Perfect. So unless there's anyone else that wants to add anything on this question, I will go reading the questions from the audience, and then let's wrap it up. So the first question I saw was from George. So let me unmute George. Hi, George. So you were asking about Lucene to be like part of Elastic. And we gave you a short answer, but yeah, please elaborate if you want. Oh, did I? Okay, ask to unmute. So you should be able to.
Yeah, I am on mute now. Thanks. Thanks for this opportunity. So I was wondering, I've seen that a lot of, it seems the direction of Lucene is coming from Elastic. Maybe I'm wrong. And I have read some blog posts that seems to be connecting most of new features in Lucene to Elastic. And I'm wondering if Lucene is currently managed by Elastic. That is the future development. Thank you.
So I think, Alessandro answered you in the chat, which is the basic answer is no. But there's some more subtlety to it. I mean, just the straight ahead answer is what Alessandro said. It's an Apache owned, project managed. It's an Apache project. So not Elastic, but Elastic committer. There are many committers who work for Elastic. That is true. And there are also many committers working for other companies. I work at Amazon. We have several committers working there. There are many people working at, working on Solr who come from a variety of different commercial or other backgrounds who are also committers of Lucene. And I'm sure there are other companies that I don't know, I'm not mentioning, but one governing principle of Apache projects is that if a single company becomes a dominant representation on a project, it's something that needs to be addressed by the board, and they will actually step in and work to make sure that that's not the case, because it's very important for this software to remain open and not be controlled by a single commercial entity. I think I've heard this happen in the case of some project in the past. Maybe it was Cassandra, I'm not sure. There was a single company running it, and I don't know what action the board took. It would be interesting to look. But anyway, this is not the case.
Perfect. Ian, do you want to add anything? I think probably we answered the question.
Yeah, I think it's really healthy that you see a lot of good contributions to Lucene, both from Elastic, the company, and from other big users of Lucene. So it's kind of a building block that many organizations benefit from and contribute to and fix bugs in, and it's benefiting all the others as well. So when we fix a bug for Solr in Lucene, it automatically is fixed for Elasticsearch and the other way around. So it's kind of I think it's a success story of an open source project that you have actually active contribution from competitors.
Perfect. So let's move to the second question in the pending list. Dimitri, I'm unmute you so you can go over your question.
Yeah, thanks, Alessandro. So I guess my question was probably already answered, but now that Solr and Lucene are sort of in separate projects, do you think that the feedback loop kind of extended in a way or increased because, after Lucene change, basically, until after a Solr committer picks that library, is that fair assumption?
Yeah, I think Uwe kind of addressed this, but I'll just say that, I don't even think it will be that big a change, because previously, like I know that many Lucene committers would make a change and run only the Lucene tests before committing. And sometimes, well, you would run, maybe you would run a pre-commit, but sometimes you would only find out about some Solr test breakage through a Jenkins build. I mean, this has happened more than once. Probably it shouldn't have happened, but it did happen, I would say, several times. And now we're just in a situation where that will be, the expected situation rather than a kind of a reality that sometimes would happen. But I don't think it's too terribly different from the way things were before in terms of bug breaks, build breakage and bugs. I think this question about whether Solr will depend on nightly builds of Lucene or not is open. So that's a question of how tight, the integration will remain. We'll see whether it's a nightly build or just the previous release build used in Solr.